Welcome back. So here we are in the UI, and we are going to take a look at those pre-batch attributes that we spoke about in the last video. So the first thing we want to do is bring up our pre-batch definition. Now, I have mine open down here, but remember the process for doing that would be to go to Configuration Browser, find our pre-batch definition, and go ahead and just right-click and do an Open in Notepad++. So here's our pre-batch definition, and remember I said that these first attributes we're looking at, the IDF pre-batch attributes, are going to be in this top section up here. When we get to the attributes that are applicable to each pre-batch component, we're going to be within this pre-batch component section, so all the attributes will exist down here. But for now, we're going to be in this section, and you can add the attributes just in one straight line as long as it's inside of this last bracket. Or some people just style will enter down and put them one on each line. But again, this needs to be the last character, this greater than sign, for the top section of the pre-batch definition. Now, we talked about ID quite a bit, and here we can see the ID for this pre-batch definition of ttrain-book. Now that ID needs to be unique. This can be the only pre-batch definition that has this ID unless we pair it with the attribute called output profile ID. Then it's going to be the combination of those two attributes that make this pre-batch definition unique. And like I mentioned earlier, we're not going to get into the specifics of output profiles because that's going to be a topic for a later video. But what we are going to do is we will move on to the next attribute which we looked at, which was expand quantity at pre-batch. Now, before we put that in here, I want to look at something in the UI real quick. So let's take note of a few things before we start making changes to this product template. So first off, notice that we have a quantity of 10. Now that's not going to be impacted by what we're going to do next, but it is going to be important to kind of keep an eye on for some of the things we're going to do later. The other thing that I want to take note of is if we come down here and go View Pre-batch, we can see that this PDF output currently has 10 pages. So we could scroll through here if we wanted to. But just note that it has 10 pages. So we'll go ahead and close this out. We'll come back to our pre-batch definition. And I'm going to come up here and we're going to use the attribute. Whoops, better make sure that we get the case absolutely correct because case does matter when you're putting these attribute names in. So we have expand quantity at pre-batch, and this is either going to be true or false. Now the default for expand quantity at pre-batch, if you do not specify this attribute, is false, but we're going to change it to true. So we'll go ahead and save this, and for that to take effect, and for pretty much any change that you make within the pre-batch definition to take effect, at a minimum you have to reprocess the order at pre-batch. Now as we will see here in a little bit, there's a couple situations where you actually have to inject the order again for the changes to take. But for this one, we can simply come up here, come down to reprocess at pre-batch, and we will let that go through its normal changes here. So we're up to the pre-batch phase, we finished that. The order is completely reprocessed, and on the surface it doesn't look like anything's really changed. We still have a quantity of 10, so nothing's changed there. But remember what we did here is we told the system to expand the quantity at pre-batch. So if the quantity is 10 and our original document was 10 pages, we now, if we view pre-batch, should have an output that is 100 pages in length. So we'll come down here and go to View Pre-batch. And sure enough, we can see that our page count is now 100. And if we make this small for a second here, and then scroll down, take note of this yellow fish here as page 1. We'll come down, here our yellow fish starts again. So here's our second set of these pages coming up. So we'll go ahead and bring this back up to the top. And that is how we use the expand quantity at pre-batch. Okay. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to take a look at the attribute called copies multiplier. Now that one, if everything goes how we expect, we should see the quantity of this product change. So we'll come back down here, and we're going to add another attribute to the prebatch definition. And this one is copies multiplier. Now this is going to be an actual number that we specified, not just a true or false value. So here, for copies multiplier, we are going to go ahead and say, let's multiply it times 3. Now, this is one of those attributes that you can't simply just reprocess at prebatch. For this one, we're going to need to take the original order XML and drop it back in, because this multiplication of the number of copies actually happens during the inject process, not at the prebatch process. Now, I have my IDF folder open, so I can just bring that back up. Here is my order XML. You should have the XML in the exact same place on yours. So we'll go ahead and go copy, and we're going to paste that right into the input folder. Then we'll come back to our UI, wait for this to process, and what you want to keep an eye on, which it's already occurred, so it happened that fast. So during that first bubble, that first inject, we multiplied the quantity of this order times 3 with its original quantity being 10, giving us the result of 30 that you see here. Now, the last attribute I'm actually going to skip over for right now, because I forgot that there is a requirement with that attribute for one other thing to be in play. So we're not going to look at copies divisor just yet, but we will look at that at a later video, so you can see how that's going to work. But basically, the copies divisor is going to allow you to do just the opposite of what the multiplier does. You can take a specific quantity, specify a value that you want. Let's say that the quantity coming in was 50. You could use a copies divisor of 5 to get a resulting quantity of 10. But again, there's a couple things that need to be in play for that to work, so we're not going to look at that one in this video, but we will check that out here in a little bit. So those are all of the attributes that you can use in this upper portion of the prebatch definition. Now, in the next video, we're going to start looking at the attributes that you can use for each individual prebatch component, and the list for those attributes is quite a bit longer, so we'll try to get through that in a fairly quick amount of time, but it will take a little bit to hit each one of them. So that's about it for this video, and I will see you in the next one.